the Climate Emergency Scrutiny Panel. It's lovely to see you all. We're missing Grant. We hope he will appear at some point, but I think everybody else is here. I've got a couple of sort of matters to raise at the beginning. The first one is when we're having internet issues. I'm sure that's rare for this place. So it won't be recorded live, our meeting, but once the meeting is finished, it will be uploaded as a video package after the meeting. So apologies to that, and apologies to all those people who will be desperately disappointed that it won't be, we won't be visible, before that time. Just a bit of information about the local food growing task group. We have set our first meeting on Teams on Friday, the 24th of November. So I'm really pleased that that is now starting. And finally, from me, it's hello and goodbye to Anna, who's had her last meeting for a while before going on maternity leave. So the very best of luck with that going forward. Okay, so emergency evacuation procedure.
When the continuous alarm bell sounds, you must evacuate the building by one of the designated exits and proceed to the named assembly point. Designated exits are signposted. Arrangements are in place for the safe evacuation of disabled people.
Okay, so we move on to apologies and for absence and substitutions. I think I've already mentioned, I think the only one we have is, everybody else is here apart from Grant. So, well done. Does anyone wish to declare interest? Okay. So, I have no urgent business. So we can move on to item 6, which is public and council statements. We have a statement from a member of the public, Adam Reynolds.
I don't think he's here. So.
Well, that's a blow. It's the first time we've had one and he's not here. I'm quite disappointed. What do? We let him come in if he turns up later on?
If you're into the substantial items, probably not. But he has sent me a statement, so I will circulate it.
Okay. Oh. Here he is, on cue. Okay, well, I've got another, I'll give you a chance to get your breath back. We've also had a question from Nicolette Boter, and the answer has been provided by officers and has been circulated. So that item is now finished with. So, Adam, would you like to come? Where does Adam... That's a very good question.
Joy.
Take a breath, Adam, take a breath.
Next slide. This. Okay, your attention is drawn to item 11, the Journey to Net Zero update. Paragraphs 3.7 to 3.11 of the report discuss the benefits of the CRSTS programme, that's the City Region Sustainable Transport Settlement Programme, and specifically how they deliver on the JTZ strategy, paragraph 3.5. At the WECA committee meeting held on Friday the 6th of October, the Transport Infrastructure Report, item 14, removed key elements of the Somer Valley Links project, paragraph 4.8 and appendix 2, table of CRSTS scope amendments on page 38, the Riverline project, and bodes poorly for elements of WECA's A4 Bath to Bristol and the upcoming Bath City Centre consultations. Now, it appears that within WECA, arbitrary decisions have been made on what schemes should or should not be delivered as part of the Department for Transport submitted CRSTS 2023 rebaselining exercise conducted due to forecast cost increases, about 50% increase in costs since the original bid. There are also elements where even though costs have almost doubled, the split of the funding allocated to the Baines Somer Valley Links, Bath to Bristol and Bath City Centre have been maintained evenly, spread rather than combining all funds and then prioritising high-impact, high-quality schemes across the region as a whole. It is also evident that WECA has not followed the sustainable transport hierarchy by prioritising bus infrastructure over walking, wheeling and cycling infrastructure, and this approach has continued in its rebaselining exercise. It is suggested that this panel consider raising the following issues as it considers appropriate. Given that the Journey to Net Zero update was issued 1 month after the WECA transport report, why have the CRSTS scope changes listed above not been identified as a risk to delivering the JTNZ strategy? And then secondly, given how the rebaselining exercise was badly executed, resulting in poor value for Baines, WECA should be invited to initiate a 2024 CRSTS rebaselining exercise that restructures the funding allocated to Baines and other authorities in a more appropriate manner to deliver on the JTNZ strategy. My statement also included a number of documents which I'm sure you have. Thank you very much. Okay.
Yes.
Just to pick up on the Summer Valley Links project, we've had a question about that, and the response to that is published ahead of this evening's Cabinet meeting, but most of them are the Summer Valley Links elements that you say are dropped are in fact not dropped, they're just transferred into a different programme.
Can I respond to that? The problem with the Summer Valley Links project is that it actually uses the Wellow to Midford permissive path, which closes 16 days a year and is a muddy mess. And in 10 years' time, the lease runs out. So a lot of the kind of the Summer Valley Links consultation, you need a reset button on it. It isn't, whatever is in there doesn't work conceptually or actually physically, for most of the people that will be in the area. So, that's why we attached our Summer Valley Links comment response to this particular statement, because it is really, really bad. Yeah.
Thank you for the statement. You mentioned arbitrary decision-making in WECA.
Yeah.
Do you have any suggestions for how transparency could be improved?
I think the problem is I don't know if you're managing a team, HR usually come to you and say, don't peanut butter, which is basically spread all the bonuses equally across all the team, work out your high performers, give them better bonuses than others. And this is what's happened here, is basically you have the Bath to Bristol scheme, that's what's been consulted on. The Summer Valley Links, that's been consulted on, and that includes sections in Bath, both of them do. And then you have the Bath City Centre, and each one of them is being allocated a set amount of money. That hasn't changed, and all they've done is then rip out loads of stuff. And some of the key infrastructure parts aren't even in there because they're too difficult or they're just complicated, but would actually be much more valuable. So for me, I see the problem at the moment is this concept of, these three distinct pots and you having to spend that money in those areas, work out what would have the highest return on investment, and then merge those pots into a Baines sort of solution, and allowing you as a forum or a panel to basically prioritise based on the strategy that you've set out in the JTNZ. Whereas what they're doing at the moment, I think, is it's becoming a bus improvement scheme, and it's also pouring a lot of money probably into areas where there may not be that big an improvement, but it's not to say they shouldn't do it, but is it the right thing now, particularly with, I think, the government letting slip that CRSTS2, which starts in 2027, is going to be another £800 million for this area. So you've got your first bit, and in theory you're working out what you should be doing in this first round, and then hopefully delivering good quality solutions. Because at the moment what you're seeing in what they're doing from a WECA point of view is they're doing things like taking segregated cycle lanes, making them shared. Yeah, that's cheaper, right. So you're creating a much poorer experience for people with wheelchairs and pedestrians. And that's fine in very rural settings, but the moment you get into towns and villages, you really do want to keep that separation of different modes, and that's not what they're doing here.
Thank you. Just a comment, perhaps we should discuss at our next meeting, Chair, pre-meet, about whether this panel could look at how CRSTS funding is used in future.
We certainly, I think you raised a very good point.
Yeah, sure, you're welcome.
We appreciate the knowledge that you shared.
The obsession, you mean?
Thank you.
You're welcome. Is that it?
That's it.
Okay.
I have a question about the Keynsham Community Energy Group, which I raised at the last meeting, and somebody was going to come back to me, and nobody has. So, does anyone wish to comment on that? Ollie?
Thank you very much, Chair. Yes, I mean, so my understanding is there has been some conversation internally. Officers are looking at the different options, and I think it would be great to arrange a meeting, if we can, with you and the relevant community group in Keynsham.
Yeah, I'd welcome that, because it's a long time coming, this activity. Anything else? So do I have somebody who is prepared to approve the minutes? Thank you, Jess. Alex, to second. Those in favour? That's fine. So we move on to the first substantive item, as I like to call it, which is the Cabinet Members' Update, which I've allocated 15 minutes to. So, Amanda.
Okay. Slides are coming.
Thank you very much. This is titled Highways Portfolio Update, but I'm taking the opportunity to talk to you about two other projects that I run that don't fall in the Highways portfolio, but I think you might be interested in. Could I have the next slide, please? And the first of these is the City Centre Security Scheme. I'm trusting that all of you have read the update that was circulated in advance, and so I'm just going to pull out a few key facts. One of the things that I feel really strongly about is if any of you go onto Twitter or onto any of Nextdoor, any of the other social media bits, you will see regularly people are saying City Centre Security Scheme is £8 million, £9 million, £10 million, £11 million. In fact, the highest number I have seen up till now is, and this person knows it for a fact, it's costing us £12.5 million. It is not costing us £12.5 million, it is costing us £7.4 million, which is still an eye-wateringly large amount of money and is still more than was originally budgeted. There are three reasons for the fact the budget went up. One, the cost of doing work everywhere has been subject to inflationary pressure. Two, we've extended the area that it was going to cover. And three, and I think most importantly, the original plan was not incredibly good at letting both businesses thrive because of being able to get their deliveries at appropriate times, and most importantly, at not allowing blue badge holders to have access to the area at all times, both of which were fixed when I took over the project and brought it in, both of which have cost us slightly more money, but it means the plan is better. So please, can you all do me a favour? If you see anyone says, I know for a fact it cost 12.5 million, and I'm pleased this is being recorded, say, no, it is costing us 7.4.
Can I ask you a question on that?
It's up to you, Chair. Do you want me to do my presentation? I'm happy to, yeah.
It's just that I've had people, I totally agree with what you said, but they said, oh, sorry. Hi, thank you. I've heard people say, yes, but it's more than that because of the VAT. Does that include the VAT? Is there VAT?
This is the total, so there are some things that are VATable, obviously, and some things that aren't.
Yeah.
This is the total cost of the project.
I think that's why what is being said, maybe.
I think you're being very generous at interpreting people's motives, Councillor Player. Where are we? Those of you who came in today will see that we have got our sliding bollards fully functioning in two areas now. An unlooked for consequence is how excited tourists are when they see it happening. It's quite good. Please don't anyone else send me the thing about, we should make them look like Daleks, because that's not the point of them. But in all seriousness, we are able to dress them different ways during different times of the year once we know that they're fully functioning. So we are both on budget and on target to finish at the times that we said we would. The final completion date will be July 2024. We have staged it so it causes least disruption possible, and we're having a complete embargo from Remembrance Sunday, this coming Sunday, till after the Christmas market, so we make sure that we protect those areas as well. So I hope that helps. Could I have the next slide, please, Kath? Up till now, we have tended to do a couple of residence parking zones every year. And a couple of years ago, we decided that what we would try and do, because actually there is always a cumulative impact and a knock-on effect, we would try and do a plan that covered the whole city more. This is very Bath-focused, I apologise, Chair. We would try and cover the whole city more and then see where the gaps are, and actually build up expertise within a certain officer cohort and just absolutely keep driving on in the same way that we're going to be doing with livable neighbourhoods to do residence parking zones. So we did 7 in a year as opposed to the normal 2 a year. We did actually take 2 out that were the largest and most complex ones and delay them slightly, but all 7 got delivered in a year, and we're now in the monitoring phase of what is happening. Anecdotally, we're getting a lot of very, very good, I know, Councillor Clare, you've been very generous in your praise for how it now works, given the mitigations we brought in. Yes, but they always will have. They always will have. And, you know, it takes a good 6 months generally for them to bed in. And I think in yours specifically, given the fact you've always got 2 wards, a ward when students are there and a ward when students aren't there, we need to make sure that we're monitoring the whole amount. So monitoring is ongoing in all the areas that are just outside. And we will be looking at mitigations for safety specifically if there is a lot of traffic that's being displaced, and we're already getting a lot of requests for further RPZs. Currently that is not budgeted because we've done all the RPZs that we were going to do, but that does not mean there's not money for mitigations, and it is a shame that some of the people who we wanted to join in with the RPZs in the first place chose not to. Because what we predicted would happen has happened, but until they saw the fact that there was going to be displacement, that they weren't particularly willing to get involved. Next slide, please. This too is something that wasn't necessarily a highways project. It's a major regen and heritage project. You may have seen, I think it was last week we got the press release out, that although the weight limit was due to expire on the 15th of November, we have installed some monitoring to test the bridge in terms, I mean, obviously safety is our highest priority, and although if you talk to my colleagues in Wiltshire or Dorset or anywhere else, they tend not to necessarily believe us, but the answer is that we do need to carry on doing more testing, and whilst we're doing more testing, we will be keeping anything over 18 tonnes off the bridge, and we have extended that for a further year. Completely separately, there is a piece of work that I am working with Western Gateway about, which is the sub-regional body that looks at key route networks, strategic route networks, etc., about what is the best way long-term to get freight to and from the M4 and the south coast. And the recommendations from that study are sitting on the Secretary of State's desk, which is where they've been since April. I understand he may be visiting Bath this coming month, and if so, I shall be in a long queue of people saying, can I just have a very quick word, because we would quite like that to be done. I do get weekly reports on how many overweight lorries go over, and despite the fact, again, were you to read Twitter, people are saying, you know, I've seen 20 today. The answer is it's less than 0.1% of total traffic all the time, and they're all followed up in terms of warning letters. Could I have the next one, please? I had a very fruitful afternoon yesterday talking to a French TV channel who had heard about our emission-based parking and came over and wanted to learn about it because they want to do it in Lyon, apparently. You may remember January 2022, we did emissions-based parking for our own residents in terms of how their residents' parking zones worked. And obviously it makes complete sense that if we adopt the principle of the polluter pays, those with the highest polluting vehicles pay more for our own residents in residence parking, it makes sense to make sure that we do that for car parks, which of course some of our residents do use if they're coming into town, but also are predominantly used by tourists. So that came in on the 8th of September 2023. So obviously this particular panel, it's too early for us to have done very lengthy monitoring. So there's a few sort of anecdotal things that we've seen. We are increasingly hoping, so I think the figures were that we thought that maybe 37% of people would be paying more. But what seems to have happened, and if we have any more detailed technical questions, I believe I've got Andy here who can answer, what seems to have happened is that the people who have got the most polluting vehicles actually aren't bringing them into Bath. They may well be using the park and ride, which is why we are doing this. This is the answer for why we are trying to do this all the time, is to keep the polluting vehicles out of the middle of Bath. And park and ride usage is incredibly strong at the moment. We've all got our fingers crossed for beautiful weather during the Christmas market, where park and rides tend to be full all day, every day. Could I have the next slide, please? Are we on TIP? Yes, we're on TIP. So, the TIP programme, Transport Improvement Programme, is a appendix that comes with the budget papers in February of every year. So we had an aggressive TIP programme, £1.1 million. It used to come direct to us, now it goes to WACA, and WACA give it to us. So we've got lots of the schemes there, as I say. It's openly on the council papers document from the budget. We have done 20-mile-an-hour speed limits. We've done safety improvements. We've done area parking reviews for a lot of the areas, and some mobility improvements. We are on track to deliver the TIP, with the possible exception of two interventions where, once we've done the feasibility, it doesn't look like we can deliver the intervention as specified, but that means they will roll over to next year and we'll find another way of doing it. 1.1 million in highways terms is not a lot of money. I just want to put that out there. It's not gone up, it's not changed, at least we've not had a cut, but it's not gone up for over 5 years. There are some bits that we absolutely statutorily have to do, so that covers things like if very sadly, if there's any fatalities on our road, we have a pot of money which we use to investigate the reasons behind. So it's not even like the 1.1 million is completely discretionary. And crossings can cost, again, if there's no power nearby and we have to move a gas main or do anything like that, they can, a crossing could cost between 150 and 200,000 pounds in extremis. So when you think of that and you think of the whole area of Bath and North East Somerset, 1.1 million capital isn't an awful lot of money. I think that may be it in terms of my slides. The only other thing I'll mention very, very briefly, because I was told that people may be interested in it, and I believe there's a couple of questions coming up as well. Joel came last time about livable neighbourhoods, and he's coming to the next meeting about livable neighbourhoods. In the interim, we are just carrying on doing the implementation of all the decisions that have been made at Cabinet and ratified and here, and via single-member decisions. And we will be announcing, hopefully today, that we're going to do 5 more experimental traffic orders in the way that we've done the 3 that we've done up till now in order to carry on that work. So I didn't want you to think she was here. She didn't talk about livable neighbourhoods, and look, something's gone out this afternoon. So you know before it's gone public, but that is the plan for later on this afternoon. Very happy for any questions. Thank you. Oh, crikey, blimey.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Mona, for the update. It's just a quick one on the park and ride, and obviously around the parking charges changes. The people of North East Somerset, we don't have a regular bus service into Bath. Let's just stop that one there. So there's higher charges. Obviously, I'm guessing you're trying to encourage more park and ride. Yeah. The criticism that comes back from the parishes to me is around times. So was there a plan to extend them late into the evening, and what's happening with that, and what's the timescale if you are planning to do that, please?
Very good question, Councillor Box, and I'm sure everyone who's sitting on this bench is right behind you in your drive to get more rural buses back as well. You're spot on right. What we did, we took the park and rides back in-house in effect last year, so we've now got far more control over how we run them and when we run them. Because this has been quite an expensive project to try and bring them back in-house, what we want to do is get to a stage, which is why the Christmas market period is so vital for us, where we've overachieved against our budgets in effect, and we're ring-fencing all that to reinvest back in the service. So things like extending into the evening, it may potentially just be a couple of evenings to begin with, the late night shopping evening. Some days is another big issue. If people want to get in, especially if they want to come in for one of the early services, they can't use the park and ride to do that. So absolutely, it's kind of, but it's a bit of a virtuous cycle. We need to make sure that what we've currently got is there and covering its money, because it's now at our risk. But absolutely want to do that. And if parishes want to write to me with more ideas, that's brilliant. But this is absolutely our plan to be able to do that.
Yes? So, John.
Thank you. Cleveland Bridge, overlaid with Lawrence. So you say it's a tiny proportion of the traffic. Do you know what that is in absolute numbers? Lawrence per day?
I do, but you're going to have to bear with. I will get the actual... You'll get hot off the presses the absolute latest figures.
Rather than doing that, I will say, would be that it's both 0.1% and 20.
Absolutely right. No, absolutely right. Here are the weight restriction figures. Weekly. Oh, okay. It's 0.09% running. So the total catches are 50. Let me just make sure I'm not giving you. So on a weekly basis. On a weekly basis, we're looking at approximately 482 a month have been identified, of which we have then sent warning notices to them.
482.
Thank you, Chair. I had some questions from the last meeting that I'm hoping to ask you now. So, substantial underspend in several highways teams due to vacancies, including vacancies in parking services and network and traffic management. Are we missing out on income due to vacancies in parking management, and what vacancies are not being filled in network and traffic management, please?
Thank you, and thank you also for having the courtesy to sort of bring me a bit of time, because I wasn't at the last meeting, so I hadn't seen it. Let me just make sure I've got the exact numbers for you. No, they're not. So you're right, we have been in the past running a very high level, especially of CEOs, civil enforcement officer vacancies. We're now down to, I believe the number is 4 out of the 30 odd that we're meant to have. So you're right, there is an element of each CEO brings a certain amount of parking fine income with them. That's not really the reason we do it. I mean, we obviously don't want to sort of be foregoing this, but especially in positions where we've just introduced the RPZ, and especially in positions, we actually do it because we want to, and Andy, who's here, and his team do a really good job of this, of sort of educating people about why there are some restrictions in the places there are. It's, it's around safety, it's around making it better for people, not just car drivers, for people to move round Bath. The fact we've got to as low a level as just 4 vacancies out of 30 is to the team's credit. You may have read in the newspapers that actually all Wiltshire's equivalents have gone on strike. They're in a really poor position where we are bucking the trend. It's not, the team does a brilliant job. We do have some issues with health and safety with the team, and we have zero tolerance to anyone who is abusive to our team. And we work really hard with making sure that they got the right protection on them. So I would say, although look, I would love to be at full capacity, actually having 4 out of the 30 not filled currently is a way better situation than we've been in the past.
Just wanted to thank you for your update. I had a question about on the TIP. So I saw that new 20 mile an hours have been put in Timsbury, and there's another one. I was wondering if it would be possible to meet with you at some point to discuss some of my own area, because there's some very dangerous roads in Keynsham which are currently 30, where they're on school routes and everything. So
I would be delighted to, and one of the things that we're looking at, because obviously we're in the budgeting process for next year, one of the things I'm looking at is doing the 20 mile an hour a little bit like we've done with the livable neighbourhoods and the RPZs, bundling all of them together. So in terms of communication, in terms of officer time, we have a real drive next year to pick up all the areas that are requesting 20 mile an hour zone. We have to work with the police, because the police have got a yes, no, we will support it or we won't, but get all of those requests together and then do it as a programme to do 20 mile an hour on rural roads and within villages and within other areas that are requesting them where possible, and do that. In an ideal world, if we were given the powers to do this, I would like to be able to say that we could set a default and then by exception make it different than 20 mile an hour in the built-up areas. Sadly, the government has not seen fit to give us those powers, and please don't, well, you can ask me the question because now I'm allowing you to do it. It's exactly the same with the pavement parking issues that we've got at the moment.
Thank you very much. Okay, we're running over time, so I'll take Sasky's question. If yours are quick, I'll take yours, and that's it.
Okay, try and make it quick. This is another one that I think asked Ollie at the last meeting. This is about parking, though, so that's why I wanted to ask you, Councillor Rigby. I would like to suggest that free parking for councillors based in the City of Bath is reviewed, both through night permit and by using an outdated paper parking, unless they're a blue badge holder. I believe this is an outdated policy and not in line with our climate and ecological emergencies, and I brought this up when we were talking about showcasing leadership. That's why I want to bring it up again.
So, again, it's a point, it definitely needs to be looked at. We review everything as part of the budgeting process, so we'll be looking at it as part of the budgeting process, and as you know, that finishes with a recommendation to Council in February.
Yes, and then Judy.
Okay, thank you for the really helpful update, Manda. I wanted to quickly ask a question about the RPZ's rollout. As you know, in Morelands Ward, we're on the edge of the Oldfield one, and we've seen a significant overspill problem. Thank you to the Highways team for working with me to put in some immediate mitigations to deal with some of the visibility issues. My question was, could you say a little bit more about what monitoring is going on, specifically on the impacts outside the zones, and will that feedback feed into the one-year review of the RPZs? So specifically in my mind, I know there are some bays which appear to be very underused right on the edge of the zone, and if they were dual use, it would ease a little bit of pressure on the spaces around one of the big play parks in my ward.
And that's precisely the kind of monitoring that's being done. I've had preliminary figures from Paul Garrett. I need to go back with him and make sure that we've got the right figures. And then I'd like to set up a meeting with you very specifically about what we can do on sandpits. And hopefully this will make you feel even better that although the big review happens in a year, because you do need the year's worth of data, we will look at doing sort of individual interventions earlier if there is something that could ease pressure. It's unlikely that we'll be able to change things to dual use before we do the big review, but we can do, as you said, some of the mitigations around making sure people aren't parking in unsafe areas. So we really, and your perception is correct, absolutely correct, about the fact there's been some displacement. What we haven't got the data for, and what's really quite difficult to get the data for, and this is why we sort of need to do it, is this the fact, is it caused because there are some HMOs in Oldfield Park where there have been 5 students each with a car and they're now parking them separately, or is it caused by the fact that some of the larger houses in both Westmoreland and Oldfield Park, they have decided to park their second car outside the area rather than pay for 2 parking permits? So that's the bit of data and analysis we're trying to do at the moment to see what is causing this actual problem, because if some of it is, if students then learn by the time they come back next year they really shouldn't bring the car back in at all because they can't park, that will solve some of the problem as well.
Good, that's really good to hear that's been looked at. Thank you.
Pleasure.
Thank you. Just referring to what Jez said actually in talking about the play area, I'm guessing Monksdale Road, and of course the bottom end of that is in Westmoreland Ward, and I'm assuming that might be one of the sections you might be thinking of putting in dual-purpose bays. Would like to be in on that one, if
absolutely.
you do, please. And my actual question is, it's about the state of the roads. And this is very personal as well as for other people, but I'm not now able to get on a bus and use it. I'm slightly getting back to being able to be a passenger or drive a car, but very slight, because the states of the roads, they get repaired, and then so quickly they are back to an appalling state. Are we using less good materials to fill these roads for maybe financial reasons? Because we get something filled and we get a nice patch done, and almost immediately it's a state again. And that really affects somebody like myself with few issues.
You have my empathy, June. You have my complete empathy. Sorry, Councillor Clare. June. I can call you June. So no is the short answer. If you look at the overall trend, so we get a maintenance grant that's completely separate from TIP. In order to keep steady state, that maintenance grant should have been about £7 or £7.5 million a year for each of the last 10 years, and it's been £5 million. So we've had an ongoing deterioration in the state of our roads because we've been underfunded hugely to do it. Now, my challenge to the officers was, well, you know, that's a fact, and frankly, in the current environment, I can't see us getting an awful lot more money, so what are we going to do about it? So we've invested in a new, it's got a very specific name, and I can't remember what the name is, a new machine that does the filling, not the resurfacing, but does the filling in of the potholes differently, and we've only had it for about 6 months, and the potholes that it's done do appear to last longer, because I understand exactly what you're saying. This isn't just a Bath problem, this is, or a Bath and North East Somerset problem, this is a national problem, in that a lot of the road surfaces are genuinely now not fit anymore, and patching just doesn't work, in that it creates a very small solution, but then the moment you get the weather last year, the amount of patching and what we had to do was nearly double what it would have been in a good year, because we had perfect storm, no pun intended, of a lot of frost, a lot of wet, a lot of drought, so that it sort of contracted, expanded, and the potholes that turned up all over the place were dreadful, and the team did an outstanding job, again in my opinion, to make sure that we got on top of them. But what we're really pushing for is a financial solution that allows us to resurface, because resurfacing has got to be the answer, and we would concentrate, we've already got the list drawn up, we concentrate on any of the routes that are used mainly by buses, or on the route to school, or our heavy cyclist used routes, and we would prioritise those, because we're never going to have enough money to do all of them, and that's what we're aiming to do. But your point is well made, Councillor Clare.
Thank you.
Okay, I must apologise to Sassy because you ran out of time. If you have a question for Amanda, please email it to her. Thank you very much for your efforts.
May I make just one last comment, Chair? I hope I've said it, but I'm incredibly proud of the team. The amount of work that's gone into delivering this is high, so I would like it on record that the team has done an outstanding job.
Okay, so I'm sure she'll get on it.
Andy, use your microphone.
Right, okay, that's much louder, isn't it? I'm not sure it's a good idea. But we move on to the 40-minute item. We actually went 10 minutes over, Amanda, so we're 10 minutes behind, but obviously very valuable stuff. So, the journey to net zero, I'd like to hand over to Sarah. Thank you for coming, Sarah, who's going to give us an update on where we are with this particular main plank of our scrutiny. Thank you.
Hi, thank you. So thank you for putting this on the agenda. So, as I'm sure you all know, in 2019, Bath and North East Somerset Council declared a climate emergency, aiming to provide the leadership to enable the district to achieve carbon neutrality by 2030. So this was in response to the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change Paris Agreement of 2018, which set out that whilst the countries of the world were committed to achieving 2 degrees, not more than 2 degrees of warming, also that they would have a strong aspiration to limit warming to not more than 1.5 degrees. So in response to that, the Journey to Net Zero document, our sort of strategy, was adopted in May 2022. So the colours you're looking at here, by the way, these stripes were developed by Professor Ed Hawkins of Reading University, where darker blue is colder and darker red is warmer, and they represent the last 100 years of global temperature. And they illustrate how, the extent of warming. I think they're a very graphic visual reminder of the fact that we're actually firmly on course to reach 1.5 degrees of global heating, which has been identified as a higher risk from there of tipping points that will result in irreversible changes to the planet. With corresponding risk of changing life as we know it. So, the Journey to Net Zero document we adopted in May 2022, and from a Bath and North East Somerset perspective, it outlines all the elements of what a net zero transport system might contain. What I should say is that transport currently accounts for 29% of our emissions, carbon emissions, in Bath and North East Somerset, and in common with the rest of the UK, transport has been rather intractable in terms of reducing its carbon emissions. So other areas of the economy, such as energy generation, have reduced in carbon emissions a lot over the last 10 years. But transport, not so much at all. So there is a lot of scope for reduction here. So if we go on to the next slide, please. Yes, so what Journey to Net Zero did, really, was to set out a vision. It didn't, at that stage, identify timelines or a work programme, but it set out a vision of the elements of what a net zero transport system might look like. So the vision, I'll just read it briefly. Bath will enhance its unique status by adopting measures promoting sustainable transport and decision-making, whilst reducing carbon emissions and the intrusion of vehicles, particularly in the historic core, improving the quality of life for local people, enabling economic activity and growth, and enhancing the special character and environment of the city. So if we go on to the next one, yeah. It also identified some objectives, and some of the key ones of those are about reducing vehicle carbon emissions to achieve carbon neutrality by 2030, improving air quality and health, widening travel choice. I think what I should say is that the Lib Dems are committed to a genuine choice of modes of transport. Movement around the city and the wider district is vital. We're not interested in curbing people's mobility, but we're really interested in enabling and supporting people in rethinking the modes of transport that they use. So we'll turn over again. So this is, next slide please. Oh, who's that? Pam, yes. So in the manifesto, what we actually said was we would enable travel choice to make it easier for those of us who can to leave our cars at home more of the time, and making access easier for those who have no choice but to use a car. And so one of the things that we're planning to do in the coming months will be to set out a transport action plan that will put some more of these elements into a bit more of a project and programme management structure. And I've just been discussing with Pam Turton this morning as to whether perhaps this might be the sort of document that we'd like to see reporting annually to full council or something, and it'd be interesting to hear your thoughts on that. On to the next one. So Journey to Net Zero sets out lots of projects under broad headings that will help us. So some of the broad headings are better public transport options, creating improved places to live and work, cleaner and greener school travel, and connecting Bath with rural communities and market towns. And you'll have gathered that some of those were encompassed in some of what Councillor Rigby has already updated us on. I mean, essentially it's about redirecting the whole thrust of the direction of transport policy as it has sort of, existed nationwide. Nationwide it's been rather car-dominated over many decades, and it's about, it's turning that oil tanker. That's not the best analogy, but it's about, it's turning a big tanker, isn't it? Turning the whole direction of transport strategy. Right, so now we're going to highlight, as you've gathered, the breadth of Journeys to Net Zero is very wide. So what we decided to do, because we can't tell you about all of it, we thought we would pick out some of the most current projects and give you a little bit of detail about those. So there's been some news on the Clean Air Zone in the last month, so we'll just highlight that first. So back in 2017, government directed us to reduce the levels of nitrogen dioxide in the atmosphere in Bath City in the shortest possible time. So that was a legal direction. Technical work showed that a charging clean air zone was the only measure that could achieve compliance in the required time, and so a Class C charging clean air zone was introduced in March 2021, and we were the first charging clean air zone in the country outside London. Class C means that the vehicles that are charged are the most polluting vans, taxis, HGVs and buses. And there was money that accompanied the introduction of the zone that supported the upgrade of vehicles. So 18 months in, we've shown a lot of progress, and based on the 2021 data that was submitted to the government's Joint Air Quality Unit for review, they have now officially declared that we are deemed to have reached what they call State 2, which means that we achieved legal compliance during that calendar year 2021. Now, locally, we've already released our 2022 data, and we know that it's better. So we know that we're already showing a 26% reduction in nitrogen dioxide for that calendar year compared to the calendar year of 2019. So that's a positive story and shows us pretty much leading the country, I think, on that particular topic. So on to the next, please. So the next area we wanted to highlight is the City Region Sustainable Transport Settlement Programme, which was mentioned by Adam Reynolds earlier. So it's an area where the West of England Combined Authority has obtained £540 million for a whole package of projects, all aimed at supporting sustainable transport of one sort or another, whether that's improving the infrastructure for public transport or for cycling or for walking. So Bath and North East Somerset has £120 million to spend over 5 years with a delivery deadline of March 2027. So two of those projects in Bath and North East Somerset have recently been consulted upon. So there was Summer Valley Links, which aims to improve some key A road corridors in Summer Valley. So the A367 from Summer Valley in towards Bath and the A37 towards Bristol to improve sustainable transport options on those roads, and the Bath to Bristol Sustainable Travel Corridor along the A4 from Bristol again has just recently closed its consultation. We've got a new consultation, a next consultation coming forward next week, which is the Bath City Centre consultation, which again is about improving both public transport and cycling and walking options around the city centre. Early next year, we'll be hearing about a wider range of walking and cycling schemes a little bit further out around Bath, so not concentrated. So the one coming up next week is very much concentrated on the centre, and the Bath Sustainable Walking and Cycling schemes that will come forward early next year just deals with the wider area of Bath. We've got the Midsummer Norton Transport Improvements, which in fact is where some of those walking and cycling schemes from the Summer Valley were moved, which was the point I made to Mr Reynolds earlier. So they moved out of the Summer Valley Links project into the Midsummer Norton Transport Improvements. And I'm not sure when do you know when that's going public, Pam? Early next year. There was some money set aside for maintenance of Manvers Street as part of this project, and then the Livable Neighbourhoods programme that you heard about last meeting and we'll hear about next meeting. So another item that's quite current at the moment is micro-mobility. So as you know, Voi scooter rental has been in place in Bath and North East Somerset for perhaps a couple of years now in collaboration with the West of England Combined Authority. And back in September, WECA decided to changed the contract from void to tier, and the big advantage of tier is that they're able to provide e-bike rental as well as e-scooters. So that's been a rather exciting development, and it has proved out to be very popular. So since the start of September, when the new scheme launched, we've seen over 5,500 journeys on e-bikes and 28,000 rides on e-scooters. In terms of parking, so this has come to the fore, and there have been a number of issues associated with that transition from void to tier, and we acknowledge that. We've been working very closely with the West of England Combined Authority and with tier to resolve those. So in the early days, we were seeing rather more bikes than scooters, and then perhaps more than we needed here in the city. And of course, the thing with bikes is that they're physically bigger than scooters, so they take more space to park. So one of the things we've done is to rebalance the fleet that's here in Bath to little more towards scooters, which has helped. And we continue to work to improve the parking situation, but I would say we are receiving fewer complaints. We have briefed council staff who are out and about around the city that if they spot poor parking, and if they're capable of doing so, they can move the vehicles, and if not, they will flag it up to other council staff and to our tier rangers, who will come out and sort it out. So we certainly are receiving fewer complaints than we were at the start. And we are still in the process of developing more concrete measures. So in the first instance, there may be some paint on pavements, and in due course there will be, in some places where appropriate, there will be physical parking bays, and in other places there may be on-road scooter parking and bike parking. So there is another question that sometimes comes up, is whether they would contribute to reducing carbon emissions. And certainly under the void trial, we worked closely with the University of West of England, and they studied the scheme in Bath, and they have confirmed that of the 206,000 rides on e-scooters, there was a net reduction in carbon emissions of between 5 to 7 tonnes. So I think that demonstrates that there's the potential for rental schemes such as this to be an important and effective part of carbon emissions reduction. Right, we'll go on to the next one. So car clubs. This is, so Bath has had some car clubs in place, but it hasn't been a major focus for the council in recent years. And we are now looking to re-procure a new scheme. So what a car club is a membership organisation where members can have access to a car whenever they need it. So it's like rental, but the car will be parked probably on the street nearby or in a car park. So that it enables those people who perhaps have a car that they don't use very often, they might use it, once a fortnight or something like that. If they know they've got access to a car club and there's enough vehicles, then they may start to have the confidence to let go that vehicle that they're not using very often. So it does support net zero aspirations, as well as saving on-street parking, reducing the pressure on parking, because the car clubs will tend to use newer vehicles, and we may be able in our procurement to specify that we want them to be electric or to be low emissions. So we've got evidence. So we're working with an organisation called Como UK, who are a charity who specialise in this area, and they will support us in ensuring that our procurement is as effective as it can be and brings forward all the elements that we feel are really important. And that's where it will be interesting to hear from you all today, because we could do a bit of policy development around this area if you have particular views about how the car club offering should look. We can ensure that that is incorporated into our procurement strategy with Como UK. So we hope that our new car clubs may be up and running by spring. And we are looking that they would serve not only the city, but also rural areas and smaller towns. We're currently just defining the parameters, really, that we're going to go out with. So we'll go on to the next. So another manifesto ambition that we put forward was to publish, in close consultation with residents, a 10-year future planned cycling route map for our district, as well as a vehicle circulation plan for the city. And these are documents we've started work on. So in terms of the circulation plan, what it will do is it will identify routes and enable us to cater and plan strategically for all modes of transport around the city, sort of recognising the different characteristics of different types of roads on our city network, and, you know, as well as recognising and ensuring that we protect our precious heritage assets. And then the walking and cycling master plan for the district will outline all the key routes we need to develop that will link our rural areas and our market towns, and will improve links into and around Bath. So that will be a vision for a comprehensive walking and cycling network. It's a really new and exciting development, and it will start to put us in a much better position when it comes to bidding for these, the competitive bidding process that we seem to have to go through to get funding from government. So the better we've got an explicitly set out strategy and how a particular route fits into that strategy, the more likely we are to be successful. Now, we've said that listening to residents is one of our big priorities, and we are going to work very carefully with our communities. We are all the time, I think, refining our methods of communication. We want to use new and innovative methods. You know, we are genuine about this, and we want to be better at it. We want to listen to people's concerns and aspirations for our district, and we want to reflect those in the plans and options that we put forward. So that will all be coming forward in the coming months as well. And a final slide, another new strand of work is closer working with some of our key anchor institutions, some of our biggest employers. So we've got a new post which is jointly funded, working on common transport and travel themes, working with the universities, both of them, and the RUH. Which is about, working jointly on our shared net zero aspirations. I think all those organisations have probably declared a climate emergency, and it's about working much more closely with them to see how we can reduce the emissions arising from commuter and visitor and patient travel around our district. And we, the partnership working, I suppose, is recognising Bath and North East Somerset Council's role as both a delivery agent, an agent of delivering solutions, as well as a facilitator and convener. So I think that's I've highlighted all the things I wanted to do, and I'm happy to take questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. I'm going to start with Saskia. She was Saskia, then Michael.
Thank you, Sarah, for the update. First question is about tier, I guess. So as a ward councillor, I've been asked to suggest on-pavement locations, but not on-street parking locations. So I wanted to ask about for an update on that, because obviously the use of pavement space is problematic for many people, particularly for visually impaired people. So when will the council consult on on-street storage locations?
I would say that if you have, we certainly have plans to, wherever we feel it's the most appropriate location, we are looking to create a process for having on-street parking. So if you've got places where you think on-street parking is better than pavement in that location, please just put them forward. And, it won't be immediate because, as you know, there's a bit more administration associated with creating spaces on road because there'll be some paperwork, some traffic regulation orders and so on, but we'll get there.
Could they be in combination with the TRO for the cycle hangers? Because that's obviously already going ahead. Could they be tagged along to that?
It would need a bespoke process for themselves because it's location specific, and we would need to be able to demonstrate the rationale for taking carriageway space for the kind of racks, I suppose, for bikes and e-scooters. But it is something we're actively working on at the moment. So as Sarah says, please do provide the locations, and we can work with you on that.
Thank you for the update. I've got three very quick questions, or two questions in a statement, really. Would it be possible for me to meet you and find out a bit more about the Midsummer Autumn package, just so that I understand properly what the transport issues are there? When I know what they are, but to get a much better feel of the issues, if that's okay.
Sure, let's catch up. That would be great.
In terms of car clubs, again, I'd be very happy to look at a car club location in Midsummer Autumn. And then with the cycling routes, the extension of the Greenway is one of the big popular issues within Midsummer Norton. And I know that when I was canvassing initially, we were looking at that as an issue, and about whether the possibility of extending the Greenway past Thicket Mead out towards past Tesco's towards Farrington, and whether that was ever a possibility in terms of using the old railway line as a location for cycle paths. And I think the cost was the issue that came up. It was going to be too expensive. But
I think that's right. So in terms of the railway path, I think we were unsuccessful in a bid for funding, one of our bids for funding, and that is a very expensive project. But certainly within our plans over the next 4 years is the creation of a cycle route between, I think, Poulton and Farrington Gurney.
Yeah, there's that running alongside made alongside the road rather than on the cycle path. Yeah. Yes. Although I think that what's included in the various streams of funding is to make it a fully segregated from the road. Am I right? Yeah. We'll check all the details, and we can catch up about that when we meet. Might as well.
Thank you. James, Jude.
Thank you. Thank you, Sarah, for the presentation. It's really good to see this package of measures under Journey to Net Zero, and a good contrast to the kind of screeching halt at national government level. So it's really good to see we've got momentum locally. I had 2 questions. Firstly, whether there are any kind of public engagement plans around this package of measures to kind of draw people in and have conversations about what this means for them and how it can work. And secondly, on school streets, can you say a bit more about what the council's ambition is? How many trials and when?
Yeah, absolutely. So we absolutely recognise the importance of public engagement, and we've recently been successful in recruiting a new transport communications officer, and their very first job will be to pull together a comprehensive communications strategy, because what we are aware is that there are quite a number of different schemes that will be coming forward into the public domain with quite similar timings in the coming months, and so we want to make sure that that is well communicated to the public, that they understand that each strand that comes forward is part of a wider whole. So that will be a priority for us, is to have a clear plan about how we communicate the range of projects that are coming forward. On school streets, so work has started in terms of those schools who have come forward and expressed an interest in becoming a school street. I believe have been having meetings with officers, and officers are also doing a wider sort of prioritisation exercise. I believe they're looking at all the primary schools across the district to see which ones have the potential, and scoring them against a scoring matrix. One of the criteria will be around the enthusiasm of the school, because from what Pam, we're very fortunate that Pam has experience of putting in school streets in her previous role, and has recognised that it's really vital that you have the buy-in of the school community. But that isn't the only criterion. There are certain criteria around the type of roads that the schools are on, and so on. So we're currently doing a prioritisation process and speaking to some schools, and there may be others that we go and meet in due course. And we're looking, I think, so what a school street is, actually, probably I should say, in case anyone isn't aware, is a timed temporary closure or restriction on traffic movements in a street next to a school at school drop-off and pick-up time. So there will be decisions to take around, what the right form of closure or measure in any individual location would be as well.
Thank you. 2 or 3 questions. Going back to the CAS, have you got any plans to expand it, or is it just going to stay where it is now?
So, I mean, in terms of the physical expansion of the area, when we have discussed, what next steps there might be, the physical expansion tends to come out as one of the more expensive options, because if you think about it, the expense of putting in the cameras and so on, and the number of cameras and so on that you would need. It does come out as one of the expensive options, so it's not something we've really been considering in great detail.
The reason I'm asking is because the CAS that affects my ward starts by the Sainsbury's garage on the Lower Bristol Road.
Yep.
Hardly any distance down, you then have the Windsor Bridge.
Yeah.
I know that we have an air quality monitoring machine there.
Yeah.
What is the difference between the figures on that machine and just a bit further up the Lower Bristol Road?
Well, I don't know that off the top of my head, but we do have there is a page on our website where you can look at data. It's long-term data, so it's annual data, and it has. I think if you go onto our website and search on air quality long-term, something like that, you can see every one of the monitors, and there are graphs of the air quality over time. So I can find that out for you and let you know.
That would be good.
But you can go and it is something that you or residents can go and look up.
That would be lovely, thank you. Regarding the car club,
yes,
well up for that. We do have the odd development being built in Westmoreland Ward where, such as down at the Riverside, there is a car club scheme there. However, I feel that they do not provide enough cars for the usage.
Right.
And I just wondered, having one maybe or two for a large populated development obviously isn't enough. And I have an example actually. He works for the council. He lives at Riverside, and he's now based no longer here where he could walk to, and he's based out at somewhere else in might be Midsummer Norton. I can't remember. He now has trouble being able to get there, and has ended up buying a vehicle because because there's no car club, because he would be monopolising that car all day if he booked it.
Yes.
Unless, of course, you have a scheme that when the car is somewhere all day while he's working, other people could access it, but leave it there available for him to use to return back to Bath. I don't know.
Well, I suppose the advantage of working with Como UK, who are specialists in this field, is that they will know whether that's a model that exists, in Britain, and whether it's something we could introduce. And I'm sure they will also have advice. But do send us, if you've got thoughts based on you and your residents' experience, but then please send them through, because, as I say, we're developing policy at this stage. But I'm sure that Como UK will have information about how many cars you need for what density of population, which I'm sure it would be the exact sort of expertise we'll be working with them.
Because there's obviously a difference with a private scheme and the council scheme.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Chair. I have one question, and it's to do with that slide that's up there, the anchor institutions. There is a plan in the pipeline at the moment, which is to do some development work at the REC, has the potential to increase hugely the number of car journeys into Bath over the whole course of each year. Could we be working better with the promoters of that development plan to help them understand we don't want this enormous potential increase in materials, to work better with them on alternatives?
Can I check? Is this a current planning application, do we know? Okay, so I can't make much comment then, except to say that in general terms, our planning officers do work very closely behind the scenes with, promoters of all large developments, and we'll be looking at issues such as this. But thank you for raising that important point.
I think we all understand the spirit of the question. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you.
Thank you. I wanted to ask about data in terms of the Journey to Net Zero plan. So how is progress being measured, and when we'll be able to see the data on progress towards reducing car journeys? And is the council looking at adopting a target for increasing active travel, so having a positive measure as well alongside that? I guess this could be part of the action plan that you've mentioned.
Yeah, that's an interesting question about adopting a formal target around active travel, and I'll take away and consider it because it's a good idea. Around data, so I would say that across the whole organisation we are working, and in fact there's a paper at tonight's Cabinet meeting, I think, on performance management. So it's something as a whole organisation we're working on that. There are areas, of course, where it's easier to count what you're doing, and there are areas where it's a bit harder. And some of these areas around carbon emissions are a little bit harder to find the exact right data. But it's under development. So performance management, and absolutely my aspiration would be that we get to a place of reporting on, carbon emissions from transport and journeys and so on. But working out how to collect accurate data and then present it in a meaningful way is challenging and takes time.
Thank you very much. Very quick, 2 questions. Around the car club, I recognise it's very early days and we don't need a full explanation now, but can we just maybe at a further meeting get a bit more clarity around, for example, the research base we might have for it in the UK, where you're planning to trial this, and if you're planning to kind of just stick to the city and the larger towns of Baines, or if you're having more ideas around rural communities, because I think it would be very popular if you could have, for example, electric vehicles with electric charging at village halls and work around that. So, you don't need to answer today because I understand it's very early at its stages, but it would be great to have a bit more information around that. And the other thing is, my second question, school transport. In rural communities, I understand is a huge bill for the council. We use small transit diesel vans. Would the council be willing to maybe look into investing into electric vans going forward to pursue this climate emergency?
Thank you. So in terms of car clubs, we're very keen that it should encompass areas outside the city centre, whether that's rural areas or smaller towns. So that's certainly the basis on which we'll be going ahead to attempt the procurement. School transport is not so much my area. I am aware that it is a very expensive area for the council, and we are looking to see how we can reduce costs. I will take it and pass it back to my colleague who works on this area, the suggestion of electric vehicles. I don't know how that will impact the cost, but certainly it would help us in terms of climate emergency. So yeah, I'll pass that message back.
Any further questions? Thank you, sir. That's very, very helpful. Appreciate that. Lots of information there. Lots of stuff. The only thing I've got is cargo bikes.
Thank you. That seems like something we perhaps should be looking at. But
So TIA will be introducing, I think, a couple of cargo bikes into their fleet in the coming weeks or months. So they'll be available for rental. The council itself has one, I think, that you can rent via the council's website for a short time to try out. And I know that in the past, as part of the clean air zone, there were some attempts made at using I've tried to work out what the word is, sort of freight delivery using cargo bikes, and I think that they weren't enormously successful, so that's obviously something we need to perhaps revisit again in future.
That's still there. Thank you very much, sir. That's very, very good. Right, we move on to the initial response to climate
action scorecards. Nothing like a scorecard, is there? So you've got 15 minutes. You're on, Ollie. Or possibly Sarah.
I'll do this. So I don't know how you want to play this. I don't know if you've all found the website of Climate Emergency UK and the scorecard. So Climate Emergency UK is an organisation that came together as many of the councils were declaring climate emergencies. I don't actually know what type of organisation. Louise is here, isn't she? Louise is here somewhere or not? No. Oh, yeah. It's a not-for-profit organisation. Yeah, okay. So, and initially what they were doing was sort of mapping where the climate emergencies had been declared and encouraging the other councils and supporting other councils with declaring climate emergencies. And now what they're doing is they are putting together scorecards to compare how they feel the different councils are doing. And so the good news is in the 2022 scorecard, Bath and North East Somerset scored rather well across the board in terms of, so our average score, I understand, was 57%, where our score was 57%, whereas the average across the UK unitary authorities was just 32%. We came 7th in the country of the unitary authorities and 3rd overall on biodiversity, 5th on buildings and heat, where we scored 84%. So those are some of the highlights, and I guess over to you if you want to ask some questions.
John.
Thank you, Chair. In a previous scorecard, we didn't do very well. And I think part of the reason for that was that implicit in the way the scorecard worked were a lot of assumptions about the way that we would approach the climate emergency, and those assumptions didn't necessarily apply that well to our method. So in that sense, the scorecard didn't give an accurate or a fair representation of the work that we had been doing. Is that still the case, or do we feel this time the implicit assumptions are more suitable, or has the scorecard sort of removed its reliance on implicit assumptions?
I think that their scoring methodology has evolved. I think that where last year they were mainly just looking at what was available on the internet in terms of policies, they've moved on to getting more into the nuts and bolts of what's actually happening. So I think their approach is evolving, and I think as a council we are probably learning too and have engaged much more proactively with it. So I think there are areas in which it is much fairer to us this year, but I would suggest that perhaps transport and waste reduction of food, where we haven't scored so high, I would suggest that perhaps that scoring doesn't actually accurately reflect all the work, for example, all the good work you've just heard around transport, I think is not effectively picked up in that score of 26%.
Jess, and then Saskia.
Thank you. It was really good to see, taking into account what you've just said to John, but it was really good to see that Baines came out relatively highly, I think 7th out of all the unitary authorities. As you said, one of the areas where we did score slightly less was around waste and food. I wondered if you could say a bit more of anything you know about why that was, and also whether our panel's forthcoming work on sustainable food could help to I guess, suggest some ways forward for the council.
I absolutely do think that work on local and sustainable food will be a big help, because I know that going back 5 or 6 years, Baines was a bit of a leader nationally on localising the food that at the time we provided to our schools, and that unfortunately there was a round of cuts before the Lib Dem administration. There was a round of cuts that unfortunately resulted in the loss of a post there, and that's an area I know that we've prioritised and would like to do a lot of work to improve our standing on again in the current administration. So I do think so. Now then, in terms of, I'm hoping that Louise might have some further information about some of this. Louise, have you got more information about waste and how we've scored the way we have?
Not on specifics, but I'm very happy to get back.
So that sounds like a good opportunity for next time. Cool.
Saskia?
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to point out the low score for transport, obviously, and that included penalty marks for air pollution levels. I think there's obviously a whole range of amazing plans, but I guess the climate scorecard's score on this point is probably showing that not much has been implemented yet. So, for example, school streets, I think that's where we missed 2 points. So I think speeding that up is very important, and not just for climate action, it would also improve public health and social justice. So I think a lot of these transport measures actually, they will improve things across the board, which is obviously very important.
I mean, just to respond to that, I think that as I said, I think the scoring has not been entirely fair for us in this area. So, for example, first question is, has the council set up or supported a shared transport scheme? Well, we've got tier e-scooters and e-bikes that we've heard about, and for some reason we only scored 1 out of 6, and we're working on more things. On school streets, we've got 0 out of 2, when in fact, we are working towards school streets, and perhaps 1 might have been a friendlier school, and so on. Air pollution, I'm trying to remember, what exactly was the criterion for air pollution? Because, I mean, given the success we've spoken about in terms of the clean air zone and us leading the country in terms of putting in a charging clean air zone.
It's PM 2.5 and nitrogen dioxide, I believe.
Yeah, I'd need to see the evidence, I think, so we can comment on that, come back on that. I mean, I think, we've demonstrated today already that we're working very hard on air pollution, and there's always more to be done. But I do think that across the whole area of transport, the scoring has not been as fair as it could be, and if it's helpful, we can share our response to it with you.
Any other questions? Okay, I've got one. First of all, I'd like to congratulate the council for achieving 7th. I mean, that's pretty impressive. So well done for that. And I noticed on the tables that we were 84% with a yellow star for buildings and heating. So what did we do that was so impressive to get such a high score for that? And if I can slip in a second question, as there's no other questions. On the negative side, we get penalty marks for transport. What are penalty marks, and how did we earn those?
I think it's what Saskia referred to. There was a penalty mark available for air pollution around particulates, which we were awarded the penalty mark. And I can go and check. I can go and double check all the data in detail. So the response the officers had given me is that there's no evidence provided for the score they've given us. So let's go and look into the data, and we can come back and report to you all about that particular point. And in terms of what we did well for buildings and heating, I mean, we've got lots of innovative things going on. So, for example, we have installed energy exchange blades in the King's Bath, in the Roman Baths. So for water source heating of the Claw Learning Centre and other parts of that building, and the pump room. And we've put solar panels on some of our nursing homes. So there's quite a number of innovative schemes that we've been involved with. Exactly. We'll score even higher. We'll be top.
Anything else? Okay. Right. Thank you very much, Sarah, for your second answer to that. I'm thinking we're going to move on now to the response to the
ecological emergency. Shame it's not an economical emergency. We've got 40 minutes on that, and I'm thinking Ollie's going to be doing that, and there are people moving about, so obviously something's going to happen. So we look forward to that. I'll pass over to... I'll give him a minute to do whatever it is he's doing. You're on when you're ready.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Chair. We're just lining up the slides there. Yes, well, it's a packed agenda today, and it's great that you've heard so much already. But so this is now looking at the nature side of our work and biodiversity. So we wanted to give you an update on the ecological emergency and the response by the Council. So if we go to the slide, I think it was one before that. If you go back up one. The one before that? Yeah, this one. Yeah. So that just gives you a bit of an outline. As you will know, there was a discussion at the panel, I believe, back in October of last year, and then the new ecological emergency strategy was then agreed, and that was agreed in March of this year. So within that, you'll see there are clear parts of the team, and you've got a number of the team here in terms of the Green Transformation Service. And we'll be talking a little bit more about some of the detail, particularly around the green infrastructure and the nature recovery, and how the Ecological Emergency Action Plan helps us to deliver that. So Next slide. So yes, that was the action plan that was agreed, as I said earlier, this year, which sets out our key actions. If we go to the next slide, so it's grouped around three main areas. The vision is to be nature positive. So in the same way that we are keen to achieve net zero by 2030, we also want to be nature positive by 2030. So this has a lot of implications in terms of planning, in terms of how the council operates itself, in terms of biodiversity and increasing biodiversity across the whole Baines area. So the first aspect of that is to increase land and waterways that are managed positively for nature. And secondly, to increase the abundance and distribution of key species and understanding where those species are. We'll be talking quite a bit about that in terms of mapping and identifying where they are. And then thirdly, to enable people to benefit from access to nature. So next slide. Some of the key areas, the actions that are being delivered by the team. So one of those, of course, is bringing nature recovery into decision making in the council, how the council takes decisions to ensure that all decisions do have that nature positive approach. And then within the land that is actually managed by the council and more widely by landowners across the whole district, across the whole area. Thirdly, looking at how to bring more investments in for nature-based solutions. And as you'll know, there are new ways of funding, and particularly when you look at ecosystem services and how nature is actually factored in, both as a way of cost saving but also a long-term impact. Fourthly, enabling more people to engage. We've already mentioned that. Fifth, improving the evidence base. And then finally, working in partnership with communities. And this builds on what we discussed previous times around community engagement. Next slide, please. So some of the achievements and areas that are already underway. So within the council's own kind of operations, we have been rolling out the support tool, council-wide decision support tool, which ensures that whenever the council is making decisions internally, that this nature positive approach is embedded in all decisions. Crucially, this is going to play a big role, as you know, in the upcoming local plan, which is now underway, and making sure that that local plan across the whole authority really does tackle the importance of improving biodiversity. You will have seen in the paper that was circulated that, of course, we know nationally there are many species under threat. We have been seeing collapse of a number of species. So how can we, in the area of Baines, improve and increase biodiversity and use the plan to really highlight those areas? Some of the areas that the council has already looked at, and these are some of the ones that are on the estate of the council. So, for example, the Odd Down Sports Ground, there is already a plan underway in terms of improving nature within that site. Also up on Lansdowne, so next to the sports grounds there as well, and that's potentially a renewables and nature project. Also the Approach golf course, as you know, that has been brought back into use as a golf course, but at the same time the company have put in place a biodiversity net gain proposal. So where we have those direct levers on our own council land, then steps can be taken. And the Parks and Green Spaces team are also looking at how to improve that across all parks. There's, as I understand it, there's also potentially funding from WECA on the Green Recovery Fund to increase biodiversity in the parks. The other one to mention here, and this again just highlights that this is across the whole area, is around the River Chew. So working with Bath and Avon Rivers Trust to improve the Chew Valley, the Chew Action Plan, which is being published shortly, and working with farmers and landowners, and we'll come back to that engagement later on. Next slide. So a few other good examples looking at improving funding for this kind of work. So that clearly, in order to deliver, we need that broader funding. There is the opportunity for a specific post for the Summer Valley, working with communities to manage local green spaces for wildlife, and that's hosted by the Avon Wildlife Trust. So where possible, these are done in partnership. The idea also at the moment, in order to really have a clear picture, we're looking to produce a state of nature framework which gives an ecological baseline, and I understand that will tie in, we'll probably hear a little bit more, that ties in also with the local nature recovery strategy, which we'll come on to. So how do we actually understand where the areas of potential high biodiversity are? How can we encourage that? How can we improve and connect those areas? And that also ties in with surveying of the sites of nature conservation interest, support farmers. So again, this importance of working with the community, because so much of the land in the Baines area is not directly under the authority's control. So that partnership with landowners is going to be absolutely crucial. And again, those landowners are being involved in the local nature recovery strategy planning as well. And we have some larger landowners who are potentially able to share good practice, and where one is able to take something on, then others can see. I mean, the Duchy of Cornwall, for example, is known as an organic producer. Are they doing things that others can follow? Can they go further? And how can we then link that also in terms of the biodiversity areas, so that, you know, under the new ELM scheme as well, the national farming scheme, and we know that biodiversity will feature more highly. So how can farmers move towards being stewards of the land in that more holistic sort of way? So moving on, a few other key areas that I know the team is very keen to highlight. The trees and woodland strategy, as you know, we've committed that high target of tree planting, and again, if you have spaces and places that you know in your areas, we're always looking to expand that and to work in partnership to identify as many additional green spaces for tree planting. The green infrastructure projects, so there are some additional large-scale projects that are being looked at. For example, one which I believe is a 45-hectare site at Somerdale, which is connected to the water space, so that's linking across the valley, and how we improve nature corridors. There's also the Bathscape partnership that surrounds the city here, developing that project further. The Summer Valley Rediscovered, a similar idea in terms of building a nature-rich green spaces around Midsummer Norton, and then the Chew Valley Reconnected partnership. So these are all different key areas that have been identified where we're able to work with the community to improve biodiversity in those areas. Furthermore, the importance of reducing light pollution is highlighted here. You know that along the river, that's often acts as a bat corridor. So the Bath River Line project is looking at bat-friendly lighting pilots along the river. So those are just some examples that are already being built, and we'd love to explore more, and particularly in the areas where you're active. If you know of others that want to get involved with those projects, that'd be very welcome. It's also important to highlight that we work, or the council works where possible, with parish and town nature action plans again. So that idea of decentralising, as we discussed in the previous meetings, about really working with communities to set their own priorities, and gathering feedback through the Voice Box survey that Baines runs. So finally, the final slide on this kind of overview is to give you a reminder that, you know, looking forwards, that engagement is so important. So we're looking at ecological emergency literacy training program that's mainly in-house to start with, to mainstream the understanding of biodiversity net gain within the council's own team. A feasibility on setting higher requirements for biodiversity net gain, nature recovery in the council's standards for procurement. So again, how do we as a council make sure that any procurement follows that biodiversity net gain approach? Building a toolkit for highways and infrastructure and regeneration, so connecting across the different teams within the council, and then again the state of nature framework, which I mentioned earlier. So there are a couple more slides, Chair, specifically about the local nature recovery strategy. So I'll go through these a little more quickly maybe. But this local nature recovery strategy, and Stuart here is the real expert, so if you have questions we'll come back to Stuart. But this is an England-wide system, and it's not just for the Baines area. We're part of one that's across the West of England Combined Authority, and it aims to map areas of importance to biodiversity, so that this way there'll be a picture eventually of the whole country, looking at where those key areas are, what the priorities should be, and potentially bringing out which are the ones that are particularly high importance that can then be supported. And we hope in the future that might even draw in additional national funding towards that. So it's being developed in partnership. I think we have a slide. Yeah, this shows you the breadth of the area. So it's led as well. WECA is the responsible authority, but then we as the unitary and the other unitaries involved are working together to develop this strategy. If we keep going to I think there's a slide with a very good flow chart that we have. Yeah, this kind of, thank you. That one kind of gives you step by step how this strategy is developed and how it really is about engaging the community. So this allows us to do some of the engagement that we would have wanted to do anyway, but it gives us another tool, another way of holding, also encouraging landowners and others to get involved. They can see this as part of a bigger strategy. So we're in that sort of, I think, on the second step, are we? So moving through that. Step 3, okay. So we're moving through those steps at the moment. So again, there are still opportunities for consultation and for engagement. So if you know people who are interested, this is a good time to involve them. And the idea is that from that, the measures will then be mapped out across the whole region, the combined authority region, and that will then inform the nature recovery strategy, which then is agreed nationally. So next slide. Yeah, this just reinforces what we've already said about how it's managed and overseen. There is a steering group that meets regularly, and the regular updates then also go to the West of England Nature Partnership Board. So where possible, there's that really joined-up approach across the West of England area. The next slide is even more useful in terms of thinking about when you can get involved or when your residents can get involved. So are we on track more or less with that timeline? Yeah. So there is already the working version of priority areas, and that draft version will then be shared, and there'll be an actual sort of formal consultation early in the new year. So there'll be an opportunity for people to feed in and say, well, this area, we missed something, or they'd like to suggest something additional. That consultation then will lead to an updated version of the strategy and the mapping, and then that will be sent through. And the plan is that is then published by the middle of next year. So I think we just had a couple more slides. I think this really just reinforces the aims that we talked about earlier, that this is really about ensuring and connecting the understanding of nature across the region, and then also ensuring that people have access to nature, so the health and well-being aspect. Next slide, please. So, again, reinforcing that this is a partnership approach. It really will be important also to bring in businesses as well as the landowners that we talked about. So, over the coming months, it'll be very useful for us to get your inputs. And then finally, this is kind of looking forward. Once it's then agreed, the engagement carries on, finalises then that architecture, that mapping, and then that first draft allows us and the other authorities involved to then work together to really bring resource to support those key areas. And one of the things we did discuss, didn't we, a little bit in the team, is how do we also involve volunteers who might want to be involved in some of the mapping and identifying where species are, because I know that's often a challenge, is it just simply to have enough people on the ground. So if there are people in your area who'd want to get involved with identifying where those species really are, that's something I think that we can explore as well going forward. There's one more slide at the very end, which is about a new national duty, which I would argue, Chair, that national government is now catching up with us rather than the other way around, and they have now put a duty together that all local authorities are supposed now to be clear on what they're doing on biodiversity. So that's very welcome, and of course we are already achieving most of the things that are being asked, and it does allow us to really keep going and go further. And we've been under that new duty, there'll be a biodiversity report that actually sets out and summarises some of the different papers that you've already seen in terms of what we as an authority are doing for biodiversity net gain. So just reinforces what's being done and hopefully allows us to go a bit further. So thank you.
you got any questions? Goodness, right. So we'll go around. We'll start with Anne and then we'll just go around.
Thank you for that. It's really fascinating. Thank you so much. So just a quick one. I had some feedback from our parishes around the clarity of a press release came out a few months ago about call for nature sites. So is that involving with this strategy? I had some people interested, but they didn't really understand what you would do with the call for nature sites. Are you asking them to rewild it? Is it something the council wanted to, manage themselves? Is it that you were going to give the landowners training in biodiversity? Were you going to create them wildlife corridors? So they really didn't understand what this was about. So it would be really great to have some information around that. And the second thing was just an observation. I had a meeting this week around bats actually, and from what I understand, the local plan update last time had a consideration of light pollution in new buildings, but we have a lot of older buildings that are really not bat compliant. Is there a plan possibly in the future to, I guess, give people a cut-off point for their light polluting and say, look, you have another 5 years with these lights, but by this point we would like you to change your lights to, and it's quite easy to do in the sense of LED and the position of the lighting. So is that on your plan? Because we do have older buildings that really aren't bat friendly. And is that in your ideas in the future, please?
Great, thank you. Maybe, I don't know, Stuart, you'd like to take the first one?
Yeah, that's fine. The call for nature sites, we're currently updating the web page at the moment because we've realised it's not as clear as it could be. Effectively, the idea is that any landowners can submit sites that they think could be managed for nature with a particular focus on sites that might be applicable for biodiversity net gain offsets, so where developers need to provide net gain off the development site. We will try and link those submissions to potential funding sources, including developers who might be looking for biodiversity net gain. So the kind of key thing is that we have a better knowledge of where those sites are, or people might be interested in doing something for nature. We can then link them with the funding that's available across the region, rather than kind of being too dictatorial on what should be done where. It's more of increasing our knowledge and the council acting as that kind of middleman and better linking funders to sites, if that makes sense. So yeah, we're updating the web page to try and make that clearer. It should be done in the next couple of weeks.
And on your second point about the bats, I think that's something we'd have to take to the planning. I'm not quite sure what powers planning has, but we can double check that. And I think it's a very good suggestion, actually, even on older buildings. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Plastic pollution is something that has the potential to be enormously ecologically damaging. From our mapping, especially of waterways, do we have any sort of areas that we are aware are harmed by plastic pollution? Is that a problem in our area? And if so, are we doing anything under theme 2 to address that?
One thing I would say, and then perhaps we can hear if there's specific knowledge that we have already, but on the overview, I think waterways as a theme is something that's come up quite strongly, and actually that is something we want to look at. I know it's been raised before by Jess as well, the need potentially to look at waterways as a standalone project, and I think that is something that could be funded in the future. But in terms of current understanding of the waterways, I don't know if there's something. Yeah, please.
Yes, thank you for the question. So we've got a number of partnerships which we work with, one of which is our water space partnerships, which we do jointly with Canal and Rivers Trust, Environment Agency and Wessex Water. And through actually using Community Infrastructure Levy, we supported the acquisition of a canal boat a few years back. And the volunteers do regular litter picks, and actually with a boat they can actually collate the plastic and then working with our Parks Department to get that collected. But also with Bristol Avon Rivers Trust, they've got a growing charity. They've only been in establishment I think since 2017 or 2018, and they've got a number of volunteers, and again there's litter picks, but obviously one of the key things is to try and stop it getting in there in the first place, and working with our colleagues in the waste department on how to make sure that any development which takes place, precludes, the opportunity for badly sited bin stores, etc., for that to happen, but also to ensure there's adequate enforcement to stop waste getting into the river network.
Thanks very much. Thanks for the update, Ollie. It's really good to see all the progress that's happening. So my question is about kind of local level community initiatives to improve nature. And this week I had a kind of drinks evening with 5 or 6 different organisations just in my ward that are community based, with no, all led by volunteers who are trying to either improve local parks or just grass verges, local green spaces. So there's a load going on the ground, and with scant resource actually, and they're being supported by our parks team, who I think are doing a brilliant job with very little people power. Your Parks and the Council's partnership with them, which I really welcome. Your Parks is doing a huge amount in terms of enthusiasm and energy. But I'm aware that these things always operate with quite short-term funding. So my question is, I guess, what does the local nature recovery strategy offer for this kind of community-level action in terms of support or resources for the future? Is it going to, are we going to continue to be able to find these pots of money to keep that really local-level activity going?
Great question, and a really good point in terms of how many volunteers are already so active, and I think where we can, we really want to find ways to further support them. Stuart, I don't know if you want to highlight in terms of what the LNRS would allow for?
Yeah, so the remit of the LNRS needs to be setting these priorities for nature recovery and then linking those to measures people can take. We want to have specific guidance for communities to enable them to use the LNRS to inform what they're doing. It's more about, the LRS is more about guiding existing funding streams, so it's not going to come with kind of new funding streams attached, but guiding things like biodiversity net gain, the agricultural subsidy schemes. What we do want to do for the LRS is better link some of those recommended measures to the funding that's out there, so that hopefully communities can use that and get an understanding, okay, well this is probably the most important thing we can do for nature here, and this is the funding that's available to do that, so we're going to try and use that to better increase communities' understanding of what's out there and knowledge of what's out there.
Thank you for the update, Ollie. It's noted that the climate and ecological emergency response performance monitoring reporting review has been postponed until 2024-25. Can it be confirmed that oversight of the implementation of planned actions and the performance of other services will be conducted by this panel in the interim? Sorry, this is coming from the Corporate Audit Committee. So the performance monitoring and reporting review for the climate and ecological emergency response has been postponed until 2024-25. In the interim, is it being reviewed by this panel?
That was a really interesting update, thank you. And looking at themes 4 and 6, I'm particularly interested in Midsummer Norton. One of my local ward residents runs the Free Rangers Forest School in Midsummer Norton, and they're based on Duchy of Cornwall land. And they have a large area of land which they're making available, would like to make available to the people of Midsummer Norton. So they've just launched a new community growing space to produce food locally for people in the town. But also they have an area they want to rewild. They have a river that runs through the edge of the land as well, which runs along the Greenway, which is obviously a very popular walking and cycling route as well. So can I set up a meeting with them to kind of talk to you about their ideas, because there's lots of opportunity, and they've basically saying we've got the space, they've got the backup, I think, of the Duchy of Cornwall as well to do this, and so they're developing. The forest school itself has over 100 children that attend the school, and the families are out all over the fields doing nature walks and wandering through mud and looking at insects and all sorts of things. So it's a very popular school. And but the opportunity on the land is huge, so I'd be very happy to set up a meeting and be part of that, if that was possible. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds like a brilliant example, and I think it would be exactly the kind of thing that we'd want to explore further. And as you say, if it's an example that then also connects with other landowners in the area, I think that's very, very welcome. Yeah, look forward to arranging a meeting.
Great, thank you.
Water pollution. Anybody who walks past the weir can tell it's very visible that we have a water pollution problem associated with sewage outflows. Is there anything that we can do about that, or do we really have to simply put up with what Wessex Water puts into the river?
Well, I mean, part of that, as you know, has to do with Environment Agency lack of funding and lack of ability to enforce. So I would say that's potentially something that would need national change, but certainly as an authority, I believe we can write to the Environment Agency as and when we spot those challenges, and it's something we can hope that there may be a different approach from national government if that were to change in the future.
Guys, that's something on that. So with the local nature recovery strategy in particular, we're trying to integrate in action to address water pollution. There's obviously there is a national element that we have less control over, but we can at least kind of give that information to farmers as to what they can do where to improve water, the pollution, reduce pollution in watercourses. And I think as a council that one of the actions we had around engaging farmers and using farm clusters as another vehicle for us to engage with the farming community. I know a lot of pollution is coming from agricultural sources. It's a big use of land, so that is an opportunity, I guess, for us as a council and through the local nature recovery strategy as a region to better communicate that and hopefully better influence measures that can be taken to reduce pollution.
Thank you. I wanted to ask about the resource constraints within the Green Infrastructure and Nature Recovery team, as mentioned in the report. What's the cause for this, and how will these constraints look to be resolved? Obviously, 2030 is not far away, and we don't have any time to waste.
Yeah, absolutely agree, Saskia, that I mean the emergency is real and action needs to be taken now. The challenge is, and I'm sure it will be discussed later on at the Cabinet meeting this evening, that the overall budgets are constantly being squeezed. Unfortunately, the amounts that are received from national government don't go up in line with inflation, and so in real terms, every year there is simply less budget available to the council. And in this particular area, my understanding is often it has to be project funded. Unfortunately, it's harder to have core funding for this kind of work, and so I think credit to the team, there is a lot of project funding that is won and bid for, and that seems to be unfortunately the model that we see, as you know, nationally, that's the way things are going, which does mean that we're always having to look for the next pot. But where possible, I think we've been very successful at securing those pots, and we'll continue to look for as many as we can.
Thank you, Chair. Very interested to hear about the bat-friendly lighting pilot. I think that there are plenty of opportunities for us to improve the LED lighting, not just on the River Line and bat corridors, but elsewhere across the city. But when I've tried to discuss it with the lighting team, I've generally found them not to be particularly interested or responsive. So I'd like to perhaps have a separate meeting with you on the bat-friendly lighting pilot and whether we can make it a broader approach to how we deal with LED lights, the colour of the LED lights, the turning the lights intensity down at night time when they're not needed, and other things like that, which can overcome the operational penalty of using lower colour LED lighting because they take more electricity to run. So that would be something I'd welcome an opportunity to talk about.
I think that's a very good idea, John. And again, I think one of the slides we highlighted that there's that need and that ambition to connect better across the different council teams so that the learning can be transferred to those who are responsible, as you say, for lighting more broadly. And I'm sure that as the initial sort of findings come out from that pilot, then yes, that can inform the wider council approach. So yes, I think it'd be very welcome to have a meeting with you and explore that further.
Okay, any more questions? I have one. I'm interested in the rivers, as you know, and
I think Wessex are being hammered quite rightly, but the scrutiny of what's going on with them, I think, is better than the scrutiny with landowners and the sort of pollution runoff from fields that go into the rivers. Now, the problem, as I see it, is that rivers have this annoying habit of going through lots of people's lands. So if you measure phosphate or nitrate pollution, it's difficult to actually identify where that pollution is coming from. So is there a strategy for, I don't know, particular positions on the river so that we can actually identify with some accuracy where or who is the causer of particular particulates?
Well, I mean, that sounds like an extremely useful way of doing it. I'm not sure at the moment. I mean, you mentioned that there has been some work with farmers. Do you want to explain a bit more, Stuart?
Yeah, this is something I was having a chat with the Rivers Trust actually about yesterday. So they're quite proactive in this issue, and they're looking at. So I think as Ollie mentioned, the national funding for monitoring has been kind of pared back over the last however long, which makes things more difficult. But the Rivers Trust are actually working with Wessex Water, I understand, to improve monitoring in certain catchments, priority catchments. So the river called Cambrook and Wellow, the River Chew. To have more location-specific monitoring to better understand where that is coming from. They're also rolling out I think it's called a River Hub, so a citizen science monitoring program, whereby people can go monitor the state of their rivers, do kind of real-time tests. So from what I understand, that together, there'll be much better kind of real-time data, so the pollution incidents can be better targeted. It is definitely a real issue in certain catchments from what the Rivers Trust is saying, so being able to pinpoint those and deal with those is incredibly important.
Is this data going to be available to sort of the populace?
Yeah, I think that's the idea, that becomes publicly accessible. There's a kind of, that River Hub will be an interactive portal that people can access across the region and then get a better idea of the state of their local river. So hopefully that should increase the transparency around some of these issues.
Yeah. Okay. Anything from anybody else? Okay, well, we move on to the
last item, amazingly, which is the panel future work plan. My understanding is that in January we will have Joel coming back to us to talk about RPZs in livable neighbourhoods, and possibly Sarah as well. And at that stage there will be much more evidence and papers and things of that nature. We're also going to talk about the budget, and obviously there's been a lot of discussion this morning about how tight they are, so we need to make sure that, I don't know what the phrase is, but I think we deserve more, but certainly get every penny that we can possibly get for these green issues. And then in March, the local plan and housing policy is on the plan at the moment. Obviously, the local plan will be at a more further developed place, and I believe the consultation to the general public will go on through the summer. So we will get a look at what is proposed before it actually goes out to consultation, is my understanding of it. Okay, does anybody else have anything to add? Michael?
Could I just ask a question on the local plan? Because I'm sort of relatively new to all this myself at the moment. So would you have a local plan both at county level in Baines and then also at town council level, for example? So would Midsummer Norton have its own plan and then debate it wouldn't?
No, well, there might be a neighbourhood plan, which is something that town councils can do, but the plan is from Baines and then Wecker is the way.
So any activity in Midsummer Norton would feed into the bigger plan for
yeah, through the neighbourhood plan is how it would be done, yeah.
Anything from anybody else?
Right. 3 minutes early. Impressive. Thank you very much for your, well, I think it's you lot really, because you're very well behaved, so thank you very much.